In the 1870s, New York City had finished construction on the Second and Third Avenues elevated railways, which caused Yorkville's urbanization to begin. Just a few years later, Yorkville had become a refuge for immigrants from Germany, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia who found the Lower East Side to be an undesirable location. German immigration to the United States was at its peak in 1882, where people of German descent made up more than a quarter of the city's total population. In
The
addition,
Yorkville Bank was founded in 1893, a time when Yorkville's population continued to rise. Businessmen who emigrated from Germany were most of the bank's shareholders. In 1918, the bank became part of the Federal Reserve, and by 1925, it was among the largest banks in America. However, now because of the decreased amount of German immigrants, and for the most part, the disbanding of the Germantown, the city has attempted to commercialize a lot of the old buildings, and now the former bank is a gap, but the original building's structure and architecture outside still remains.
Ferdinand Scholar, one of the founders of the butcher shop Scholar and Weber, first started working during 1918 as an apprentice butcher and sausage maker in Stuttgart, Germany, and studied his master's techniques for about 5 years. He looked for new opportunities for greater work, which eventually took him across the Atlantic to New York in 1927. Furthermore, after a decade of being in New York, Ferdinand Scholar met Tony Weber and together they started Scholar and Weber, a German-style butcher shop in Yorkville, Manhattan. This shop represented the hope that many Germans had of greater job opportunities in America, but also because Ferdinand Scholar came to Yorkville after it was already inhabited by many German immigrants. It showcases the tendency of people to want to stay within and group together with many familial cultural societies.
The Cherokee Building was built in 1909. At the time of its construction, tuberculosis was very common among the impoverished German immigrants of New York City. Its original purpose was to be an infirmary for those with tuberculosis, and that purpose was somewhat incorporated into its design. The windows were designed for better fresh airflow, which patients needed to stay healthy. It was the best treatment they had for tuberculosis at the time. The building was like a sanctuary, so people who came to New York to start a new life and became impaired by tuberculosis could recover and start their lives fresh. This building is significant to the neighborhood because it highlights the harsh conditions that the immigrants were living in, as the immigrants needed a source of fresh air in their houses because of the unhealthy city air.
Deutsche Kirche, or in English, Zion St. Mark's Church, was originally two separate churches, St. Mark's Church and Zion's Church, and both buildings were founded upon largely German neighborhoods. St. Mark's Church was founded in the Lower East Side in 1846, and Zion's in Yorkville in 1892. Similarly, both churches were founded in a way that German immigrants could practice their faith in the U.S. In addition, these two churches were largely populated during the end of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th century because of the mass arrival of German immigrants to America. However, at the beginning of the 20th century, the St. Mark's Church dissolved because of a large amount of their members died in a building fire, and the Zion's Church became the Zion St. Mark's Church. This Zion St. Mark's Church continued to be hugely populated in the first half of the 20th century, but eventually died down and lost a lot of its population as the amount of German immigrants coming to America went down as well. An effect of this was Yorkville's population became less German. However, despite losing many of its members, the church tried to preserve the German heritage from which they came from, as it is clear that while people were coming to a new country, their old one was still very important to them, and the culture was not one that they wanted to leave behind.